The Airbnb crash risk is absolutely huge, and it's all funded by private mortgages. And it's just going to be an absolute disaster with them actually withdrawing that credit as we speak. And in this video, we're going to go through the 7 cities in Canada with the most Airbnb crash potential. So let's get right into it. So I'm just going to read you this headline. Riskier private mortgages have soared by 72% in Ontario, and now brokers fear a wave of default. The percentage of Ontario borrowers with private mortgages has roughly hit 20%, says one broker, and he predicts 5 to 10% of those mortgage holders will default due to rising rates. And not just due to rising rates, because of a deteriorating economy. And particularly, a lot of people have took these private mortgages out and they've used them to buy Airbnb properties, because back in the stimulus boom era, it made sense to go and get an Airbnb, and people didn't realize the risk they were taking on board. So it's absolutely insane. And then just to kind of put this into context of what has happened since 2008, so you can kind of get an idea. This is Airbnb worldwide listings, and you can see here, it has gone absolutely parabolic since around 2014. You can see here, it's just gone absolutely parabolic. There is no other way of describing a chart like that. And not only that, AirDNA data actually shows that most of the hosts have been added since 2020. So as you've had other hosts withdrawing and selling their Airbnbs or potentially going to long-term rentals, you've seen the hosts grow in 2020, 2021, and 2022. They've gone to the moon. And that is exactly what you would expect in a bubble, really, isn't it? Because typically towards the end of the bubble, you see the smart money rotate out the market and they hand those assets to the weak hands, to the dumb money. And that's exactly what we've seen. I've been to these host meetups, and you just would not believe the type of things I've heard at them. People don't even know how much money they're making. They don't even know their expenses. And, you know, people were just doing it because they felt like it was a good thing and it was going to be a good thing long term, instead of actually doing the due diligence and the homework and treating it like a business and realizing they're actually in the hospitality sector and they're just glorified hotel managers essentially. But they think they are large real estate investors, and they are about to experience a reckoning, because the first thing that happens during a recession is travel demand absolutely plummets, and we're beginning to see the early stages of travel demand going down in terms of occupancy rates. So I'm going to take you over to this, and this is what's kind of started everybody talking about Airbnb, is Nick Jurley from Reventure Consulting. Fantastic YouTube channel. This guy is just really, really good. And he put out this tweet: the Airbnb collapse is real. Revenues are down nearly 50% in cities like Phoenix and Austin. And yeah, I remember going to Phoenix in 2021, and people there were like, no way, house prices in Phoenix are never going to go down. And obviously they went down subsequently in 2022. But in 2021, they were like, they're never going to go down. It's because of people retiring there, people moving there from other parts. And it just never ceases to amaze me. You go to different bubbles, different countries, different stories, same outcome. It's hilarious. It just goes to show. But then you can see on the tweet, you can go to my Twitter and see this, or go to his Twitter and see it. But it's just insane. The amount of revenue drop city to city. I mean, like Phoenix, for example, down 47%. Austin, Texas, 46%. That's right by Travis. You know, absolutely crazy. So let's get into the cities now with the most potential Airbnb crash. And you wouldn't expect the number one. It's not going to be the one you expect, Toronto or Vancouver. So let's get right into it. Number one crash risk is actually Victoria. Believe it or not, Victoria in British Columbia, Vancouver Island, has the biggest crash risk. And to kind of put the figures into context, what I essentially did is I looked at the amount of total households in each city, and then how much of the Airbnb supply makes up in terms of a percentage of those households, just to get an even idea per city of, how far out of whack Airbnb really is, how many Airbnb listings there really are, because obviously cities have different population sizes and it's really more about household sizes. So that's what I did. And some of the data will blow your mind. So there's 49,000 households in Victoria. There's over 1,100 Airbnbs, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 2.3% of households, the highest in Canada. So let's get on to the next one now. And obviously, it is Vancouver. It's one of the big ones that we would expect to be on there, and it is on there. So number 2 crash risk is Vancouver. And in Vancouver, you've got 305,000 households and over 4,600 Airbnbs. 1.51% of total households. So just kind of crazy. And these numbers are, if you measure Airbnb by city in this way, you actually get a better idea, because I did this with cities in the US, very similar. But places like Tulum in Mexico, the percentages are at like 30-40%. It's just absolutely crazy, guys. Really is. So anyway, let's move on to the next one, which is obviously Toronto. 16,615 active short-term rentals in Toronto. Those are units that are gone from the long-term rental market that aren't for sale. And quite frankly, that is a lot of supply being took up by Airbnb. If you look at Toronto, there's 1.1 million households and there's over 16,000 Airbnbs, and that is 1.45% of total households in Toronto. I know the numbers don't sound a lot when I'm saying 1.45%, but the reason I've done it this way is to put it into context city by city, because obviously it's different size cities. It's hard to adjust. But, 16,600 Airbnbs, it's a hell of a lot. It's a hell of a lot, guys. So let's move on now to our number 4 here, and that is Halifax. It wouldn't be the one you would expect to be on there, would it? But it is. So Halifax has 2,063 active rentals. It has 190,000 households in Halifax, obviously over 2,000 active rentals, and 1.08% is what Airbnbs are taking up of total households. So kind of crazy. So let's move on to our number 5 right now. And who would you expect this to be? It is Montreal. So Montreal has 8,276 active rentals. Now, the funny thing is, when you look at the inside Airbnb data for Montreal, most of these rentals are unlicensed and technically illegal, because a lot of these cities are clamping down. That's another huge risk to Airbnb. If you're not talking about recession risk, you're talking about the risk of red tape coming in that basically shuts you out of that market and just bankrupts your business entirely. I mean, look at what happened in places like Edinburgh in Scotland, and that is coming to lots of cities. And I honestly don't blame them, because it's not like it's a level playing field, is it, between hotels and people turning their random homes in subdivisions into essentially hotels. It is kind of crazy. At least make it a level playing field, in my opinion. I hate red tape, as you guys know, but I believe in fairness, obviously. So Montreal, 8,276 active rental. There's 816,000 households in Montreal, and that's 1% of total households. And then we move on to Calgary. Calgary, 4,321 active rentals. You've got 502,000 households in Calgary, over 4,300 Airbnbs, and 0.86% of the total households is Airbnb supply. And then last but not least, we have Ottawa. And Ottawa right here has 1,922 active rentals, 407,000 households, and it has 0.47% of the total households are Airbnb. So absolutely crazy, guys. And what I want to show you as well is how some of the trends have formed. We'll just quickly go through this. So for example, in Victoria, you can see what happened in 2020 is exactly what you would expect. listings come down, Airbnb inventory comes down, and then of course stimulus boom happens. People start thinking, hey, let's just buy a second property, we could Airbnb it, blah 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 blah. It took off on social media as well. That's another thing that people don't discuss, but it really did take off on social media. I mean, you could buy Airbnb courses. Everybody was talking about Airbnb on YouTube, TikTok. All these influencers, big influencers, were getting into it, and they've got their fingers burnt now, a lot of them. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. So that's what Victoria's trends are doing. Vancouver, it hasn't reached the pre-pandemic peak yet, so you saw it come down. But you can see what happens during a recession. The Airbnb inventory decreases, and that heads onto the housing market. And this wasn't even a severe recession. I mean, a lot of people were still looking to go on vacation during 2020 and 2021, just local and closer to home. So actually the demand for Airbnbs was there, but in a true recession, that's not true. And you see that with the airline staff charts that I've pulled up on prior videos that I'll link at the end of this. So it's kind of crazy. You can see what happened with that. If you look at Toronto, Toronto has grown significantly, and you can see, look at the growth here. You've gone from 15,888 to over 20,000. And when you think about the growth in just a single quarter, that happening, it will be a lot of people that it's no longer feasible to rent it out long term. So they've gone to Airbnb to try and make more money. Seems like that's a easy way to do it. You don't have to deal with evicting tenants, blah, 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 blah. And they are just going to get absolutely run over. And you can see how people who are in denial and don't want to sell their real estate are just trying to hang on, do whatever it takes. But that will be the case for a lot of people. I mean, how else does it make any sense that from Q4 to Q1, you had that much of an uptick in Airbnbs in Toronto? I mean, literally, guys, you're talking about the difference between 15,888 in Q4 2022 and 20,005. That is an insane amount. That's like over 4,000. That is just nuts, or around 4,000. Sorry, my math is pretty off there. But it's around 4,000. That is crazy. Absolutely crazy growth. And it makes no sense given interest rates right now. And then you look at Halifax, and Halifax really boomed. I mean, you went well above where it was, and it started to flatten out and come back down, probably because of bookings. People are starting to realize. And if you look at the occupancy rate here, doesn't look good, does it? So now let's go over to Montreal and see what's going on. And you can see it's been kind of flat, but it came down like everywhere else during the pandemic. And then it's gone back up, and you're still sitting at 12,000, which is just insane. And look, between Q4, Q1, you saw some growth there. And then if we look at Calgary finally, you can see that it's really flattened out there, and you can see that its growth is above the before the pandemic. So it's absolutely insane. And you see that same trend, people selling them during the recession, even though it was a short, sharp recession. You can see occupancy rates are nowhere near where they were last year. And then if you look over to Ottawa, same thing, occupancy rates are even less. And you can see that the growth really hasn't surpassed what it was pre-pandemic levels. So there's a lot of things at play here. And, you just cannot hide from this chart. I mean, it just goes to show we have gone from like under 1 million listings in 2015 to over 7 million listings. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. That is crazy growth. That is what you refer to, guys, as a bubble, and it's the Airbnb bubble. And then the truly horrific thing about this is really the fact that you've had the growth of the people in 2021, 2022, and 2020. I mean, they now make up 54% of the people on Airbnb, and of the listings, on Airbnb. So, all these people bought these crazy high prices. A lot of them will have variable rates in Canada. It's an absolute disaster. It's a shitstorm, and it's just ready to happen. This will, and people will be in denial about this. But when the recession truly materializes, materializes, sorry, and people see it in the labor market, this thing is going to crack. It's going to be like a waterfall, in my opinion. It's going to mean rent prices are going to go down. It's going to mean housing prices are going down. I cannot believe we are talking about Airbnb crash potential. But as you guys know, I've been on about this for ages, and I've done many videos on it, like this one here. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. And also